Let's talk about retro tracks, because Mario Kart World fucking sucks at them. For as good as I think this game is, it definitely makes a lot of weird decisions, with one of the lesser talked about issues being this game's handling of its retro tracks, and given that the last Mario Kart content we got before this was nothing but retro tracks, it does make World's situations stick out a whole lot more. Typically speaking, every new Mario Kart game since DS has had the same setup, 16 new tracks and 16 returning tracks, usually separated into 4 cups of new tracks and 4 cups of retro tracks. Looks like somebody didn't get the memo. Mario Kart World does keep the tradition of 16 new tracks alive, however it only has 14 retros, and that's with me begrudgingly counting Mario Circuit and Peach Beach, leaving the game with a total of 30 tracks compared to the series' standard 32. Now I see why it costs more. But that's not all, as on top of missing 2 whole retro tracks, this game's rather coy about the retro tracks it includes, as there's no acknowledgements as to where these courses originate from, which has been a series staple from the very beginning. And more importantly, they're just kinda sprinkled into whatever cups the developers see fit, only leaving us with one legitimate retro-specific cup, and they even fuck that up. Can someone tell me what's wrong with this picture? But that begs the question, why change something that's been so integral to the series for the past 20 years? I can almost guarantee the response has something to do with the whole open world gimmick of Mario Kart World. That's just kind of the natural go-to. And to be fair, the Mario Kart series has had its fair share of very out there course design, but the more I continue to play, I still can't shake the feeling that this game is missing something, particularly in that retro department. And then it clicked. This single mission awoken something in me, validating a feeling that I have had almost since this game's launch. Mario Kart World is missing quite a few retro tracks. What exactly do I mean though? Am I just making this video to bitch about the fact Wario Coliseum has yet to return? Well, but seriously, there has been way too many times to count in the past 70 plus hours I've spent playing this game where I feel like this game could have easily benefited from including another track from a previous title. Maybe not as an actual race, but maybe something along the lines of those SNES track missions. Believe it or not, Mario Kart World is not the first game in the series to have races canonically coexist with each other, as it's been a pseudo-staple of the series going all the way back to Double Dash. And even if it wasn't, the Mario Kart series is comprised of so many simple yet memorable courses that implementing them into an actual interconnected world would be like the furthest thing from difficult, which makes our current situation that much more baffling. So in the spirit of missed opportunities, here is a collection of what I consider to be the missing retro tracks of Mario Kart World. Arguably one of Mario Kart World's biggest flaws has got to be the transition sections between tracks. If you've spent any time playing this game, then you've no doubt spent a considerable amount of that time on these random ass roads and highways. If only we had tracks based on that very concept. Just like Mario Kart World isn't the first game to have tracks canonically coexist with each other, it also isn't the first game in the series to introduce the concept of driving around on random roads and highways. In fact, it was considered a staple in many of the older games. I'm talking Toad's Turnpike, Mushroom Bridge, Moonview Highway, Shroom Ridge, and Mushroom City. All tracks you would have expected to see in a game built almost entirely off the back of the Federal Aid Highway Act of '56. Look it up, it's true. These tracks were tailor-made for a game like this because they literally are random roads and highways, this game's bread and butter. So, how many of them make an appearance in this game? A drum roll, please? 0. It's fucking 0. Look, I will admit, I am a man of excess, clearly, so if it was up to me, I would 100% have all 5 of these tracks in the game because, I don't know, I like to make sense, but I do understand that including all 5 of these tracks would be a pretty bold move. But so is 0. Not every track here needed to be a legitimate race within the game. In fact, all of these tracks with the exception of Mushroom City could have easily been implemented in the same way the SNES tracks were. Sure, Moonview Highway and Mushroom Bridge are technically connected to Mushroom City, but let's be real, had they actually included Mushroom City from the start, it would be pretty unlikely for those 2 tracks to also be included in any sort of Grand Prix. If anything, the game could have likely had Mushroom Bridge cameo in one of the transition sections, likely the one heading directly to Mushroom City, while also including Moonview Highway as the last section of said transition leading directly into the track itself. But since we ended up with fuck-ass Crown City, I'm kidding, I like you, that means these 2 tracks could have easily been put anywhere on the map. Alright, that might have been a tad hyperbolic, but you get the point. Obviously, a track like Mushroom Bridge would have needed a bit of space to include said bridge, but given the overall simplicity of the rest of the track, it could have easily fit into a multitude of different spots on the map. Same with Moonview Highway, although I would argue this one would have been a bit easier to implement, as the only challenge I could potentially see is the hill section at the beginning. If only this game had a ton of hills to work with. I personally think Moonview Highway would have been a perfect fit in one of 3 spots, either right before DK Spaceport, Toad Factory, or Crown City, as all 3 of these tracks would realistically have a large amount of traffic, but also a legitimate use for that massive toll/entrance gate towards the end of the race. But I do kind of understand why the developers chose not to implement implement these two tracks. Sure, it could have been done, but to have these tracks here in an open world setting without Mushroom City would just feel, I don't know, a little weird, because heaven forbid we have two cities. And in that context, I actually kind of respect the decision. Now, do I know 100% that is the reason why they aren't here? No, but it does make a lot of sense and is like way better than the alternative. Although this is Nintendo we're talking about. But then we have tracks like Toad's Turnpike and Shroom Ridge that don't really have any built-in excuses at all, which is ironic considering these two tracks are the reason for this whole missing retro track concept in the first place. These two tracks pretty much embody everything I said earlier about Mario Kart World's transition sections without any of the baggage of the other three tracks. They literally are just roads with cars on them. That's it. Which almost makes you think these tracks were left out intentionally. I mean, yeah, Shroom Ridge is very hilly, but so is the rest of the game, and Toad's Turnpike is literally a figure eight, so fitting them into the map doesn't really feel like that big of a challenge and makes their exclusion seem way more deliberate than just a simple oversight. My only guess as to why this might have been the case is that both tracks as well as Moonview Highway were all brought back in Mario Kart 8, but I'm sure most of you could figure out why that argument doesn't really hold any weight. Look, I completely understand why these tracks weren't brought back as actual races within the game because simply put, they don't really mesh well with Mario Kart World's more flashy and location-based track selection, and Moo Moo Meadows, which I get, but to not even include them in a special P-Switch mission is just kind of weird to me, especially when they have no problem doing that for multiple SNES tracks, which I would argue was probably harder to implement than if they had chosen to do Toad's Turnpike instead. I just thought it would have been nice to have some references to the tracks that are responsible for much of the backbone of this game's major gimmick.
Somebody say trees!
Get the fuck out! I swear to fucking God, I will shoot you.
He will fucking kill you! Officer.
Yeah! The fuck is wrong with that guy?
Trees?
This is a weird one. Out of every Mario Kart track ever made, there's only ever been 3 tracks to include a train, but only one that actually counts. Calamari Desert is one of the most iconic tracks from Mario Kart 64. It also happens to be one of the simplest, which if you ask me is like the perfect recipe for one of these P-Switch cameo tracks. And hey, would you look at that, this game actually has a sizable chunk of the map dedicated to the same Mesa Desert setting as Calamari Desert, and it's not here. What the fuck? I wouldn't even call this a missed opportunity, it's just a clear as day fuck up, and what's crazy is that this environment isn't even that common in Mario Kart to begin with, as it's only ever been used in 2 tracks throughout the entire series, neither of which are here. This is probably a good time to mention that I think Sunset Wild should have been included in this game as well, as I think it would have been neat to see this track go through its day-night cycle like originally intended. What I think annoys me the most is that there isn't much going on in this part of the map anyway, so it's not like including these 2 tracks would have taken away from anything that vital. In fact, it probably would have made this area a bit more enjoyable to traverse. And it's not like these are complex tracks either, as every SNES track here has a more dynamic layout than Calamari Desert. It's just crazy to me that this game can include every element of a track and then just choose not to include it, almost as if the game wants us to feel a little empty inside. Like I said in the previous section, I didn't need these tracks to be included as actual races within the game because that would be unfair, but I don't think it was too much to ask to have these included as P-Switch missions just to flesh out the rest of the map. If it just so happened to be that this section of the map was already filled with things to do and see, then I would give it a pass, but that's just not the case here. Instead, we're left with a pretty barren desert section with aspirations of what could have been. Up until this point, we have spent the entire video covering tracks that would have worked well within the bounds of this game's world map. But what if we went beyond that, say, to the seas, or to the skies? I hope you see where this is going. Sky Garden and Cloud Top Cruise, 2 courses that take place entirely in the skies above the Mushroom Kingdom. I think. If Mario Kart World ever ends up getting retro track related DLC, these 2 seem to be the most likely to be included, as including these tracks would in no way interfere with the already established world map, but it would have been nice to get them in the base game. It's not even like Mario Kart World is afraid of the concept either, as tracks like Great Question Block Ruins and Airship Fortress already take place up in the sky, with little to no effect on the world map. All these courses would have needed was a small transition to get racers up to them, and given that a good chunk of Cloud Top Cruise already takes place in an airship, making a transition for it doesn't seem to be that hard. It also would have been nice to get some actual Mario Kart 8 representation within this game, because as of right now, there isn't any. I mean, yeah, Sky High Sundae did make its debut in the Booster Course Pass and or in Tour, it's still not really clear, but I really doubt anyone actually considers it to be a traditional Mario Kart 8 track, which is honestly kind of crazy that not a single track from the previous game made a return in Mario Kart World. I don't know if that has something to do with 8 Deluxe still being readily available on the Switch, but even then, it's not like this is the first time 2 different Mario Kart games were being sold at the same time. I mean, fuck, I made an entire video dedicated to what Mario Kart 8 tracks I thought would come back. Little did I know, none of them would. And to see how easy it would have been to have a track like Cloud Top Cruise included does make the whole thing just a bit weirder. Same thing applies to Sky Garden as well, just not as severe. Yeah, I don't got nothing else for these two. But off-land doesn't just mean up in the air, as another track I think could have easily been implemented here is Daisy Cruiser. Now, although I think it would have been very cool to have Daisy Cruiser constantly moving around the map, I don't know if that would have been realistic for the developers to pull off. But that doesn't mean it couldn't have been implemented anyway, as they could have easily kept it in one static position on the map, as large bodies of water seem to be pretty frequent in this game. I also think it would have been pretty funny to have both floating and sinking ships as races in the game, because, come on, that's just too good, and it also gives the opportunity to sneak another Mario Kart 8 rep as a transition in the form of Toad Harbor. Now truthfully, I wouldn't fully consider Toad Harbor a missing retro in that regard, but you know, when in Rome, right? Rome Avante.
Oh, brother!
But seriously, out of all the tracks listed in the video so far, these three probably have the best chance at making an actual appearance if we do get some sort of retro track related DLC in the future. And if that does end up being the case, I'm almost certain they'll end up feeling like they've been a part of this game from the very beginning. And those are what I consider to be the missing retro tracks of Mario Kart World. Probably not what you expected when clicking on this video, but I do think it's been a pretty interesting discussion of what could have been. Now, does this mean Mario Kart World is a bad game? No, not at all, but I do think these exclusions held this game back from being as great as it could have been, and makes this game feel more like Mario Kart in an open world setting rather than a truly open world Mario Kart. But what do you all think? Do you think this game suffers from these missed opportunities, and if so, which tracks would you have liked to see be included in this game the most? I'm sure there are plenty of more tracks I could have included in this video. In fact, I actually had to leave some tracks out because I came up with them towards the end of this video's production. If you have any more tracks you think could have easily been included in Mario Kart World, I'd love to hear them down in the comments below. Hell, I'd love to do a part 2 to this video if that's something you guys are interested in and there's enough tracks to talk about. But as for now, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.
Down on the fucking...
Get on the fucking ground! We'll fucking kill you! What the fuck is wrong with you? Get out! Get the fuck out! Kill him! Kill him! Kill him! Kill him!
That's a wrap, guys!